What have been the results so far?
Well, the people, of course, of Alabama have supported overwhelmingly this administration, and they've let us know it by telegrams and letters and by word of mouth, and of course that helps all of us who are under constant pressure, and I'm very grateful to the people of this state.
From letters here and telegrams and their other forms these responses have taken, what are they here?
Oh, yes, well, you have a number of petitions with several thousands of names, and newspaper ads run by various individuals, which has, of course, brought good response.
Is there more than we see here today?
Oh, yes, there's more than, of course, this is thousands upon thousands of names here, but we've had, this just came last week. This is just 1 week's mail.
Now, looking through these today, we found all these to be favorable. Have there been any negative responses?
I think we've received, out of the thousands upon thousands of signatures and letters, we've received about 10 or 12 that have been negative.
Are they still coming in? The favorable responses?
Still coming in. And some of the negative letters, we got about 12. There's some folks that have been writing negative letters for the last 3 years.
I'm for it. I'd like to see Governor Wallace able to succeed himself. I'd like to see the constitutional restrictions that would prohibit him running again removed. And of course, the legislation required in that connection is but enabling legislation that must be approved by the people of Alabama first of all in the form of a constitutional amendment. And then if the people of Alabama saw fit to approve the removal of the restriction, then the candidate, of course, would have to stand for and be successful in the coming elections next year before he could succeed himself.
Of course, next year is an election year. Would you like to comment on your own political future?
Not at this time, because I've given no serious thought to what my future might be so far as politics is concerned. I'm in the unique position of being a George Wallace man. Without hesitation, I say that I support Governor Wallace. I hitched my wagon to his star a long time ago.
There has been some talk after we get through with the reapportionment, we might be back for another special session for some matter. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I have heard some of the talk, and you're referring, of course, to the rumors that there might be a special session for succession to enable the governor and other constitutional officers to succeed themselves or to offer for re-election to succeed themselves. And let me say this about succession generally. I have long been a supporter of it because I, as a member of the House, can run for re-election. And I have to offer myself to the people if I want to run on my record of stewardship as a public servant. I have consistently believed that we'd get better government if all of our officials not only could run for re-election, but virtually had to if they wanted to stay in politics, where the people could pass on and approve or disapprove of the record that that particular official had made in public office. Now, as far as this particular matter is concerned, as it relates to this legislature and to the constitutional officers now in office in Alabama, I have heard no talk from the horse's mouth, if I might use that phrase. I'll say specifically from Governor Wallace or from any of his cabinet members or from any other constitutional officers about succession or a special session for succession coming up in the near future.
August 27, 1965, I received a letter from Colonel Albert J. Lingo, Director of the Department of Public Safety, and he says, "Dear Governor Wallace, it is with deepest regret that I give you this letter of resignation from the Office of Director of Public Safety effective October 1st, 1965. While my plans at this time do not include running for any elective office, the increasing request from more and more people that I do so brings the possibility of such occurrence to my future consideration. I therefore want to honor your policy that any member of your cabinet considering a career in an elective office must resign. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to serve the people of our state as Public Safety Director. I am proud of my association with you, and I shall always cherish these past years of having served with Wallace. Sincerely yours, Albert J. Lingo, Colonel, Director of Alabama Department of Public Safety." I want to say that I will, of course, accept with regret Colonel Lingo's resignation October 1st because of the policy outlined in his letter, and to say that I'm grateful to him for the service that he has given to the people of Alabama and to this administration during his tenure of service in this important capacity in Alabama. And I do accept his resignation, of course, with regret.
Three members of the Montgomery City Commission, along with members of our legal staff, held a conference with Governor Wallace and his representatives in regard to the demonstrations that are taking place in Montgomery. We discussed with the governor our concern over the existing conditions here in our city and our determination to continue in our policy to uphold law and order. The governor stated that he too was determined that law and order prevail. During this conference, the matter of the need for additional law enforcement officers to supplement the forces of the Montgomery Police Department and the Sheriff's Department to cope with these existing conditions were discussed. The City Commission and Sheriff M.S. Butler have requested of Governor Wallace that state law enforcement officers be made available to both the Montgomery Police Department and the Sheriff's Department in order that our forces might be strengthened. The governor has complied with this request, and additional law enforcement men have been made available.
I'd like to say to the fine people of my area that during the present crisis that they comply with Governor Wallace's request to remain away from those areas affected by the marches and let the law enforcement authorities handle the matter in order to prevent further incidents. The governor has strongly urged that we follow his request, and the Senate of Alabama has concurred.
The governor has asked for the Senate to advise him in this crisis. And the chair has put as what he believes is the sense of the Senate, and to get their position on these two questions. First, that it is the sense of the Senate that the people of Alabama be urged to stay away from Selma and from that portion of Highway 80 to be used by the marchers, and that the citizens of Montgomery be urged to stay away from the capital area where demonstrations are in almost continual progress. Second, that the governor advise the president that this present crisis involving the demonstrations and the march from Selma to Montgomery is the making of the federal government and the federal court. The state is not in financial position to pay for the active duty of the National Guardsmen in this crisis and other similar potential crises, and that it is the duty of the federal government to furnish protection through whatever means it deems appropriate to cope with the situation of its creation.
Mr. President, it is true that if the governor calls out the National Guard, the state pays
Would
the...
be expense of the state.
And
yes.
it's also true that if the federal government calls out the National Guard, the federal government foots the bill.
Yes,
Is that correct?
this doesn't call on the president to call out the Guard. It calls on him to take appropriate means. He could do it by marshals or any method that he sees fit, but it would be up to him to do it.
Whereas for the past 10 weeks there has been a series of so-called demonstrations in Alabama which have taxed to the utmost the patience, training, and ability of law enforcement authorities of this state as well as local law enforcement officers. And whereas a federal court has ordered such demonstrations in the form of marches on public highways and streets of Alabama should be allowed. And whereas the federal court has recognized that there will be considerable burden imposed on the law enforcement agencies of the state of Alabama by the so-called march from Selma to Montgomery, and the said federal court has been assured by the attorneys for the Department of Justice that if requested by the governor of Alabama, the United States government would provide police protection for the proposed march. And whereas the governor of this state has requested by appropriate telegram that the United States government furnish sufficient federal civil authorities or officers to provide for the safety and welfare of the citizens in and along the proposed march route and to provide for the safety and welfare of the marchers. And whereas the President of the United States was unwilling or unable to provide the requested civil authorities or officers, but has stated that he would federalize the Alabama National Guard if the governor of Alabama was unwilling or unable to call the Alabama National Guard. And whereas it is the considered judgment of the legislature of Alabama that the state has insufficient financial resources to meet the indeterminable burden of the expenses of activating a large contingency of National Guardsmen for an indefinite period of time to enforce a federal court order. And whereas the state has incurred tremendous additional expenses to date in our efforts to maintain law and order in all of the towns and cities where the so-called demonstrations have occurred. Now therefore be it resolved by the legislature of Alabama, both houses concurring as follows. 1, that the governor of Alabama be requested to inform the President of the United States that the state of Alabama is willing to call the National Guard of this state to state active duty at any time to protect the life and property of the people of this state. However, the proposed march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama by so-called demonstrators along a U.S. highway has been sanctioned by a federal court, and the financial resources of the federal government should be used to pay the cost of mobilization of the National Guard of Alabama. For this reason, as well as for the reasons hereinafter set forth, the legislature of Alabama is unwilling to recommend that the Guard be called. 2, the state of Alabama is not financially able to pay the expenses of providing necessary protection to demonstrators without impairing the general fund of this state.
And let me say this, that I am against brutality. I do not like to see anyone hurt anywhere in this country, and I hope the time comes that violence will not be a part of our everyday life in this country, but as it stands now, that is not the case. I have never been infuriated to the extent of losing my reasoning about anything. I've tried to be calm and collected about this matter, and I want to say this, that my orders have always been that if you have to use force, use the minimum amount of force, and never use any force unless it is absolutely necessary. This is a picture from the Journal American in New York, and I want you to look at the use of clubs there by the police. And here's a statement from the President of the United States. American citizens have a right to protection of life and limb, whether driving along a highway in Georgia, a road in Mississippi, or a street in New York City. Now, this upraised club is not the upraised club of a Selma or an Alabama policeman. It is that of New York policemen. I also want to show you a picture here, and we could have hundreds of these pictures of mounted troops in New York. And I wish you would look here at the troops running into the crowd here, the police troops. I wish you'd look here at the use of scattering demonstrators with the use of horses. Of course, if they're used in any other part of the country, they're called Cossacks, and they're called Cossacks by the liberals in New York. But I want to show you another picture here called the Battle of Harlem, in which there are policemen, there's a club, a man on the ground from the swinging of a club, and there is the club, and there are policemen with their pistols drawn, shooting over the heads of demonstrators. Nothing like that happened in Selma. I am making an investigation of charges leveled, and if it's ever shown that anybody has violated any order of mine as a governor of the state, I will take appropriate action. I have made the statement many times as governor of the state that any eligible citizen in this state, regardless of his race, color, creed, religion, or national origin, is entitled to vote. And I say that again today to this nationwide audience. And I am against discrimination in the matter of the determination of voter right. I'm against discrimination in the matter of registration of voters because of race, color, creed, religion, or national origin.
I have prepared a statement that I consider very important that I would like to read to you at this particular time. During the last several weeks, the city of Montgomery has witnessed several civil rights demonstrations, similar to those that are occurring throughout this country of ours. There is no questions in the minds of your city commission that peaceful assembly within the framework of the law is the right of every citizen of our nation. Accordingly, the commission has recognized these rights and has issued permits for such assemblies when they were presented in a proper manner. Your city police department and your county sheriff and his staff have done a commendable job in ensuring that the laws of our community were upheld and that law and order prevailed in every instance. Now, as we approach a time when our children will be enjoying holidays from schools, I would urge you to enjoy these days in a normal manner, secure in the knowledge that law enforcement officers will be doing their job of protecting our community and upholding the rights of all of our citizens. I would further urge you to remain completely calm and to stay away from areas of our city that might be involved in these demonstrations, and to ask your children to avoid these areas. I can assure you that law and order will be fully maintained at all times. As long as we as citizens leave police problems in the capable hands of our law enforcement officers, and as long as we uphold the peace and dignity of our city, we can be confident that we are doing what is best for our community.
We have what we have today in this great country because we have always had enough of those men who would carry on through the dark and see it through. We will have whatever we have in the future in this great country to the extent that there are still enough of this kind of men. Thank you.
We, of course, support, I suppose, as strongly as any state in the Union, the decisions by those in authority to defend our interest in Vietnam and also in the Dominican Republic. I would say that you haven't had a single petition group or a single march in our state of Alabamians protesting any decision after it has been made by those in places of authority to defend the interests of our nation and of freedom wherever it might be. I am appalled and astonished at some of the trends in our country and some of the very few minority group of our people who oppose every effort of our government and armed services to stem the tide of communist aggression.
First, the wide scope of the program we have proposed for public education for the next 2 years is such that you will want to give it your undivided attention. And I might say that that is the main reason that I've called you into special session, where you will not be bothered with the 1,000-odd details of other legislation at this time. We have a wide program. And of course you know that the Alabama Educational Association and other groups have endorsed a wide and comprehensive educational program for all the children of our state. And this is a great event, and this is a great day for the people of Alabama and for the legislature of this state. We, of course, need individual attention to the teachers for next year, because they are now beginning to make contracts and to talk about new teachers for the coming year. The matter of salary increases for school teachers, 10% will of course induce many of our young people not only to go into this profession, but also to come from other states who left Alabama in years past. The matter of the increase for the colleges of Alabama, in which we recommend to you, my administration will recommend a 20% increase for all the colleges of our state, because we, as you know, have a tremendous increase in the matter of college students. Last year, Alabama led the nation in the increase in college students who entered for the first time, a 23% increase. We, of course, have the junior college and trade school program that you, of course, provided in the 1963 session, and we must get them underway. And therefore, the appropriation bill will carry a request for appropriations for these fine institutions. And of course, this in itself is going to help to build a strong state. Let's provide the beginning of an educational program that will rival and surpass that of any state in the Union. It can be done, and it must be done.
The city has been served with a copy of a complaint filed in the United States District Court in Montgomery by several Negroes seeking to have the segregation ordinance in reference to parks declared invalid. The City Commission wishes to reaffirm its statement made August the 25th, 1958, when a petition signed by a group of Negroes asked in the use of Oak Park and other parks to the Negroes. In order that it be no misunderstanding as to the attitude of the City Commissioners, we state that we have no intention of operating any integrated parks in the city of Montgomery. We are asking for the continued support of all the good citizens of Montgomery. 8 Negroes have filed suit in the Federal District Court in an attempt to compel integration of Oak Park and other public parks in the city. The City Commission felt this attempt would pose grave problems involving the welfare and public safety of all the citizens of the city of Montgomery. Therefore, the Commission is of the opinion that it is to the best interest of the citizens of Montgomery that said public parks be closed beginning January the 1st, 1959.
The result was a favorable decision from the Federal District Court declaring segregation unconstitutional in the public parks of Montgomery. This was a significant victory, and one that left every person of goodwill throbbing within a joy. This decision means, in simple terms, that public parks never can be operated in Montgomery on a segregated basis.